my original plan was to talk about something else that I was working on, but that all changed when I wound up in the ER at Good Samaritan Hospital 2 weeks ago for an unplanned overnight stay. It was, I believe it was on a Friday night. So my talk is about the lessons that I learned, and it's about what I learned about both life and compassion in those 2 days spent in the hospital. So here's what happened. On that Friday night, I was taking a walk with Jen, and it was really hot outside that day. And it was a long walk. And I remember when we got home, I started to forget things. I have 8 people reporting to me at my day job, and I forgot 2 of their names. For the life of me, I couldn't remember 2 of their names. And I had been working actively with at least one of those people to onboard her as we're hiring her. But I remembered Phil, Jesse, Liz, Spence, Andrew, Abigail, and then I pictured the faces of these 2 people. I couldn't, for the life of me, remember their names. Then a bit later, I realized that I had forgotten my home address. I forgot it. And then I remembered it, and I forgot it again, and then I recalled it wrong. And then I forgot it again. I was unsure. It seemed strange to me. And I was a little dazed and confused. So I thought, am I having some sort of a brain issue? And there's this inflection point, which some of you may be familiar with, where you have to make this decision. Am I going to go to the hospital or not? Should I go to the hospital or not? And I realized in that moment that probably the wise thing to do was to go to the hospital. So I had Jen take me to Good Sam Hospital. And as I got into triage, usually you have to wait in the emergency room. And this time there was no waiting at all. They called me right in to the triage, and I told the staff what was going on in detail. And there were more and more people on the staff gathering as they listened. And they were kind of in a panic. They were very intensely listening, and intensely, I could feel the energy of the room raising. And they had to rule out life-threatening conditions, STAT in the terms of a doctor. And after the triage, there was no waiting around. They put me in a wheelchair. They opened the doors. No, what's that Monopoly term? Do not pass go. I mean, it was straight into that room where there was this big donut-shaped thing. And it was a CAT scan machine or a CT scan machine. And they wanted to take a CAT scan of my brain to see if they wanted to rule out things. And I'm sure they wanted to rule out a TIA, which is a transient ischemic attack, otherwise known as a mini stroke. And at first, they said, yeah, we're going to put some contrast dye in you. And I refused, because I have before, and doctors have no issue. But this doctor looked at me and said, if we miss something in the scan, you could die because if you turn down that dye. So that's all I needed to hear. I said, okay, go ahead, do it. So they strapped my head in, they put an IV line into me, and the machine moved me back into this donut-shaped thing. And I could feel the dye starting to make its way into my system, and this warm feeling. I started to freak out a little bit. I was getting nervous. And then a vision came to me. I was starting to visualize myself surrounded by the guardian angels, hence the impetus for my meditation, many of whom are in this congregation right here, right now. I saw myself surrounded by my mom and my dad from the other shore, as the saying goes, and others. And I knew I was protected. And then I began to recite the first 3 of Unity's 5 principles in my head. God is all there is. I'm connected, I'm one with this God, and I get to create my existence through my thoughts. And I just kept on going through that connection that was sacred to me, the first three principles of unity, which is also pretty close to the prayer, the first three most important prayer steps in unity, as well as religious science. And I was repeating those over again, and I was affirming that I am powerful. I was affirming that I am whole, that I am complete. And so the process finished, and next was the waiting game. And thank God the CT scan was clear. That was great news. But the next step was that I needed an MRI. It's a more thorough reading, an MRI of the head and the neck. And the schedule was full. They operate these MRIs 24/7, but there's a long waiting line. So they said, we're going to put you in a room. And I was thinking, oh, great. I was envisioning what the room would look like, but I realized, oh gosh, I'm going to have a roommate. And it's this guy who immediately started making noises when I got into the room, and I realized this is not going to be a harmonious relationship. He clearly couldn't communicate clearly. There was something wrong with him, and he would yell out probably every 20 minutes, just yell out, just as loud, like my mom would say, the blood-curdling scream. He would yell out. And so earplugs were of no use. And finally, around 5 a.m., when he fell asleep, I began to fall asleep. And then, boom, all the lights in the room came on. A tech came in to take a blood test for me. I did get that experience of what it's like to spend the night in the hospital for the first time since I was an infant. When twins are typically born premature, and I spent 2 weeks in the hospital as a twin, and my brother got to go home early. But I had no recall of that, so this was my first conscious recall of spending the night in the hospital. So in the morning, the MRI happened, and same thing. Guardian angels, surrounded, protected. It was the same people. And sometimes it surprises you who is in that group of people. And after hours of waiting, I found out I could see it on my iPhone. I could read the results. I could see that the MRI looked pretty good. And sure enough, the MRI was good. So by, let's say, I'm just going to say around 2 o'clock the next day, neurologist comes around and said that I had a rare amnesia event brought on by the exertion of the walking combined with the heat, but it only affects 1 in 3 people out of every 100,000. So just imagine, like the Michigan Stadium, if you've ever been there, that's 100,000 people, or the Rose Bowl. 3 people. Only 3 people a year are affected with this particular rare thing. And if you get it again, it's only a 10% chance you're going to get it again. It wouldn't happen for years. So I had this rare temporary amnesia event brought on by walking in the heat. And I was so relieved, so lucky. And I just want to say what I was experiencing. I was experiencing 2 kinds of amnesia. It was something called retrograde amnesia, where you forget what came before in the near past. So I couldn't remember the newest employee names. I could remember the employees that had been there for a while, but not the newest ones that we hired. And then I had something called anterograde amnesia, which means lack of ability to form new memories in that moment. So when I was reminded what my address was, I couldn't remember it. It's very disturbing. And despite all of the chaos, there were some really important life lessons. And the first was that grace abounds. Grace is there for me. I survived the CAT scan. I survived the contrast dye. My health is good. Every bit of my brain is good, along with every single vein and corpuscle in my brain. And I don't know, maybe it's during the pre-chat today, Connie was saying there's a book called The Body Keeps Score. So maybe the body was sending me a message, and either Margie or Chris was talking about a book by Joe Dispenza where he talks about the mind-body connection being this loop, that the mind can follow the body, and sometimes the body follows the mind, and sometimes you get into a loop. I don't know if any of that was true. I have to think about it. Are there lessons in self-care there for me? But I do know that grace had me along with my guardian angels. And so I ask you right now, what have you ever had one of these experiences where you either summoned your guardian angels to be with you, or they just appeared somehow? A guardian angel can be a spirit, it can be Archangel Michael. It can be, as we're going to experience a little bit with Mark Mesidorian this Friday night. It can be many things. It could be many forms that spirit takes. But have you had that? And maybe one exercise is to do that every once in a while during a meditation, is just to call it in, to call them in, and see who appears. The next lesson was, I have to be grateful because there is someone that always has it worse than you. You know, when you get in the hospital, you start to go down a doom loop because someone is always coming in to poke and prod you. And when visiting hours are over, it feels like prison in a way. Here you are, you're at the total mercy of your care staff and your own wits and the scheduling of some doctor who's probably not even going to come back until the morning. Some of you have spent the night at the hospital, know what I'm talking about. And yet there were people in that hospital that were there for extended stays and were clearly suffering. And so I could see firsthand there's this board in front of you that has your nurse's name, the charge nurse's name, your name, and there was one other word on that board, and it said ambulatory. And I kind of glossed over it, first of all. And then I looked at it again, ambulatory. That means they know I can walk to the bathroom. That means they know I don't need a bedpan, okay? That means I can ambulate. I can walk. And there was this gratitude in that because the guy next to me was not ambulatory. So this leads to my other major kind of set of learnings about compassion. I hadn't spent the night since I was a newborn. And so I got that experience of what spending the night in the hospital is. And my job as a minister, I think it's important for me to know that. I got a view during this temporary amnesia of perhaps what some people go through during dementia. And I realized that there's a lot of anxiety and confusion in that moment, but there's safety in focusing on what's present. You know, this is a computer, this is some food, this is the person that, there's some safety in focusing on the present. So I learned about dementia. I learned about every person that came into that room was very, very important to me. The nurses, the MAs or the medical assistants, the tech staff, people coming in to draw blood, people coming in to clean. Every person was important, not only in their consciousness, but in the compassion that they had or did not display. And there were some that clearly didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be there. But there were others who were really important to me that were compassionate. And I realized how important that compassion is. And so I decided that for the rest of the night, my role was to, if someone walked in kind of like a robot, you could tell they didn't want to be there. My role was to say hi and to connect, to smile, to say thank you in a heartfelt way, just to, you do this sometime at the checkout stand, perhaps at Trader Joe's or Safeway. If someone is not giving you the energy this way, you give more. You give more, even if they don't give back. You know that they might remember that and they might give that energy to the next person after you, right? So that's what I think spiritual people do. But then I talked to you about my roommate who was yelling all night And I realized that he was more than just a person yelling. He had a name. His name was Patrick. And he couldn't communicate clearly. And I could hear that they were going to take him to another room. He wanted to go home. They said, "Oh, no, you're not going home." He was confused. He didn't know why he was going to be spending the night in the hospital again. And so I began to have compassion for this stranger that earlier I hated. Now, I began to pray for him. And through the rest of the night, I actually prayed for him. And I realized that I can give myself permission to not like him, but to love him. And then so I started to think about, oh, there might be people that you transact with in your daily life or periodically or at work that you can say, well, I don't like them, but you know something, I can love them as a human being. And it really does put you in this place where you set yourself up for compassion. This all reminds me of a story. Briefly, you may have heard on the news that last week an 87-year-old woman had an intruder, a teenager broke into the mobile home, snuck in through the window and began beating on her. And she got a chair and was beating back to this intruder and just kept on swinging until this person was so tired that this person gave up and began to go look for food and said, "I'm hungry." So what did she do? She fed him crackers and peanut butter, I think it was. She fed him, realizing that this person was so hungry and was probably just looking for food. But then she also called 911 because of what was going on. He was a danger to himself and others. But how strange to have that compassion. And I'm sure that she may have in that moment said, "I don't like this guy one bit, but I'm going to show him some love right now. Some love in the form of food and some strong love in terms of calling 911. And that was another form of compassion that surprised me this week. So I invite you to think about situations in your life where you may have been surprised about other people's behavior and yet you thought about ways to share compassion anyways, knowing that what's occurring for them is appropriate. Quoting Reverend David Bruner, what's occurring for them is appropriate given their situation and what they've gone through. So, and you can share some of that compassion with yourself, from your higher self to your earthly self. And that's my lesson that I'd like to share today. And I thank you for letting me share this with transparency, with this community, and with vulnerability. And I call it blessed to be here. And so it is. And Amy, I'm going to spotlight you.
So it is. Well, because of what you just shared, I have a few little things I want to sing for you. I want to sing a verse of Laura Berman's Calling the Angels for you. And then this other beautiful tune that was so profound. And thank you so much. Calling the angels, calling the angels. At my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Gabriel, before me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael. I'm calling the angels. Calling the angels, and within me almighty love. Yes, within me almighty love. Well, within me almighty love. Oh, everything that happens happens for me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything is for my highest good. All of life moves toward my wholeness, pieces of the mystery. And when I choose to embrace each moment, I can be free. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything is for my highest good. And in this life and every moment, there's an opportunity to create the highest vision that I can be. Sing it with me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything that happens happens for me. Everything is for my highest good. One more time, we're going to sing this. Calling the angels, calling the angels, calling the angels, calling the angels. A little New Thought mashup for you.
As we just center ourselves for a meditation in this beautiful time, in this beautiful place, and maybe just think about something called box breathing, and it's just a way to connect with our breath and slow our breath by breathing in and then just pausing just for a moment and then breathing out at your own pace, and then pausing for a moment right after the exhale, kind of like a box. And just find your own rhythm that feels comfortable for your body. Just being aware that you're connecting with this sacred source energy called life that's just oxygenating every bit of your body, all of your cells. And every time you exhale, you're releasing chemicals that are no longer needed, that the plants need. And so there's this reciprocity there. There's a symbiotic relationship with nature expressed in our breathing, working together with the plants and the planet. So we become aware of our groundedness, our gratitude to Mother Earth and Father Sky. Just noticing yourself relax as you come fully into this present space, knowing that anything in the past is a memory, and anything in the future is just imagination. So the powerful present moment just gently expands as your heart expands. As you deepen into this healing, perhaps theta brainwave state. And while we're here, I want you to think about calling in whatever allies, whatever benefactors, whatever angels, whatever protectors you want to imagine calling into this space. And that could be friends, it could be pets, it could be those you've known in this lifetime, or those on the other shore. Could be ancestors, God, source energy, whatever gives you comfort and makes you feel protected and connected. These guardian angels that you invite to be with you, and just giving them thanks. And so from this space, we can hand over any burdens that are going on for us into the arms of these benefactors, these angels we've called to be here with us, that have always been with us, that are expressions of the one divine. As we ask for their help in synthesizing, resolving, releasing, clarifying, whatever needs clarifying, we ask for their help and wisdom and guidance, knowing that they are expressions of the one. So let's just picture ourselves doing that. Maybe just visualize something in your hands that you need to just release, or just hand up, metaphorically hand up to the one. Becoming aware of the trust and the healing that's returned to you in your body as you continue to breathe. And maybe now picture just elements of nature, whether it's the image of the sun, the beautiful lining on the clouds, the mountains, the trees, the ocean, the flowers, the animals. Let's invite them into this space as well, where we know all is well. And let's rest into this space in the silence for a moment. And once again, just giving great gratitude to the benefactors, to the guardians, to the angels of our spirit, to the divinity that is us. And as we gently come back to the room, we give great gratitude for this day, for the music, for the message, for all that is in this present moment, for the insight, for the community, for this and so much more. I'm truly grateful, and so it is.